Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another production of League1 College Game Day. I am Coach Silent Sword coming to you here live today. Beautiful day we have. Excited to bring you guys another League1 College Game Day, and I'm here, of course, with Coach Spector.
Good afternoon, ladies and gents.
We're super excited to be able to bring this one here to you guys today as we get ready for a mid-season review of League1 so far this season. And to start this one off, we're going to go ahead and get into the look at how each team has done so far to start the season. And we're going to start ourselves off here with Buffalo. And we'll look at to see how they've done to start the season off. And you see there, Buffalo so far doing pretty good to start the season. They are currently sitting at 4-2 on the year with the loss at the beginning of the season to Boston College. Then they get a win against Temple, win against Indiana, lose against Duke, win against Western Michigan, and the big four-time overtime win against Ball State. A little bit more into each one of these wins or some of the best wins, losses, and biggest moments of the beginning of the Buffalo season. Coach Spector is going to go ahead and dive into there.
Yeah, taking a look at Buffalo here, obviously big improvement from last season. They're off to a great 4-2 start. They're 2-0 in their conference. Disappointing loss to start the season there, as you mentioned, Boston College, but then they've won 4 out of the last 5. The win against Temple was a close one. They managed to pull that one out in the rivalry game. Looking at their schedule here, their most quality win, their best win so far, has got to be the win on the road against fellow user CWAC and his Indiana Hoosiers. That's the Hoosiers' only loss this season, and Buffalo managed to get 3 turnovers against Indiana in that game and pull it out 35-25, a high quality win against a good user opponent this season. Looking at their potential worst loss, that would also be the user game against Duke. That was Duke coming off of 2 straight bye weeks, so potentially rusty, but Duke manages to win the game fairly handily, 31-10, and hand Buffalo their second loss of the year. If you're going to pick out one defining moment, it's probably their most recent play. That was an interception in the end zone to seal that win over Ball State in the 4th overtime on the road, 61-55, to get into a tie for first place in their division. Anytime you seal the deal with a pick in the end zone in the 4th overtime, that's going to be a memorable play. And I'm sure that's one that Buffalo head coach Soccer Pro is going to be remembering for quite some time.
Yeah, it was an amazing finish. Definitely a big moment to their season there. I would definitely agree that it's definitely been the play of the year for them so far. And an amazing game against a Ball State team that has been good as the last few years. They've been a really good MAC opponent, and to win the way they did with that diving interception to finish it off is quite an amazing thing. And it's been a great start for the Buffalo team that's it's had a pretty down year last year to be able to be 4-2 to start this season. As you transition next to our next team on the tab here, we got Central Michigan. These guys are also had a pretty good start last year, then had a bad second half. A little bit down year from the year previously, but this year they're looking to be back up to their form that they like to be at a 5-1 record so far, 3-0 in the MAC play. They started off the season with a big win on the road against 17th ranked or currently 17th ranked USF team. They lose to one of arguably the greatest teams in League One history right now. The Syracuse team that's has, I believe, I could be mistaken. I know it's at least up to 50 straight wins at this point. Big win against Appalachian State, blowout there, blowouts, Akron. A big time win on the road against the currently 14th ranked Bowling Green team, and of course they obliterated their rival Eastern Michigan just this past week. What do you got for us there, Coach Spector?
Well, getting the rundown here on Central Michigan, the Chips. Their best quality win this year, easily the road win against number 14 Bowling Green. Both teams came into the game undefeated, and only one. Both teams came into the game undefeated in the conference, and only one remains undefeated in the conference. Central Michigan gets the big road win, 21-12. Played excellent defense up until the very, very end of the game, and really played well throughout the whole 60 minutes. Worst loss, they've only got one, so it's easy to pick. That was the game at number 2 Syracuse, and they played well for a half. It was a close game at the half, but Syracuse was able to pull away in the second half and win handily. So as we said, that's the only loss they've had. If you're talking about quality wins, we've really got two of them. The Bowling Green game was a huge one. And that first game on the road at USF is looking better and better. USF looking like they may finish in the top 15 this year. They certainly have the potential to do so. So that was a huge win on the road there. I'd have to say the best moment for them probably came in that USF game when they were able to score with 8 seconds left. And really it was at the very end. They scored with 3:40 left. Their backup quarterback Dunn had to play wide receiver because of injuries. Made his only catch of the game, a 20-yard touchdown pass to take the lead, and then USF took the lead with 41 seconds left. So Central Michigan had no time really to speak of, but they were able to work the ball down the field, and then Dunn, now playing quarterback, was able to rip off the 20-yard run with 8 seconds left when it looked like Central Michigan was going to have to settle for 3 and take it to overtime on probably their last play from scrimmage. Central Michigan gets the touchdown run from distance and pulls out an upset win there. So a very exciting moment there for the Chippewas. And, as we said, they're 5-1. They're ranked 24th. So they're rebounding from last year and looking pretty good right now.
Yeah, these guys are looking really, really good. And like you mentioned, that USF win is looking even better and better for them as those guys keep playing good football as well. And yeah, they just look like they're back to the season 15 form, and that's good for Coach Butch Krieg there in the Central Michigan Chippewas. Next, we have here the Duke Blue Devils that I am currently the head coach of, and it's looking not so great, but also not horrible. This Duke team wasn't that great last season, kind of down to the bottom of the ACC, and you see the beginning. They started off the season with a good win at home over Wisconsin, 20-10. Then they lose on the road. Two actually on the road back-to-back user games, lose both of those. One by 11, the other one in double overtime on an interception. Then the Duke Blue Devils go 2 straight bye games. Then they get a home game against user and get a big win, 31-10. And then when they start the ACC play against 2 good teams over in the Atlantic, both just obliterate this Duke team as they lose both of those games in blowout fashion. But really both of those coming in the second half of the games rather than the whole game. But a little bit disappointing for the Blue Devils, a little bit, but Coach Spector will have some more about the Devils now.
Yeah, taking a look here at Duke, they're 2-4, 0-2 in the conference. A little bit of a rough start. As we said, they were one of the bottom feeders of the ACC last year. That's why the job was available. So it's an uphill battle right now for Coach Silent Storm. The win over Wisconsin, maybe was a little bit misleading. Those two road user losses, it's tough in user games and certainly marginally tougher on the road. They did almost give Indiana their second loss. Their best win easily coming in that Buffalo game against a 4-2 Buffalo team, winning by 21 after the 2 bye weeks. He could have come in rusty, but they get the win by 21, win it fairly handily. Worst loss, it's got to be between the Clemson and Florida State games. They were both rough games there at the end, giving up 28 points in the fourth quarter of both of those games. Florida State was able to run and pass against them. Clemson was mostly on the ground, but in both cases ran roughshod over, giving up 12 rushing touchdowns in the two games. So we'll look to see, if Duke can get that rush defense solved going into the second half of the season. They're going to need to if they want to stay competitive in the Coastal Division.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. They're definitely going to have to step it up if they want to be competitive. But the Coastal is there, and they having those first two losses in the Atlantic, they still have the possibility. It's outside shot, but they still have the possibility of trying to win the Coastal. But like you said, they got to get things turned around. Now we have on the board the Hawaii Warriors, who currently having a pretty good season again as they did last year. Last year they finished off pretty well, and so far this year at 4-2, 2-0 in conference play. And really, their two losses, nobody likes to lose, but they lose to 11th ranked Navy, who's only lost one game this year, and they go and lose to the number 2 ranked Syracuse team, which we talked about a little bit how great they've been. And they only lose by a touchdown on the road to them. And with those being their only two losses, you can't really complain too much. And then they went into a bye week. Then they play a user, win that game by 8. Then they go to the on the road to play a TCU team and beat them by 2 scores. Then they beat UNLV 35-17. And just last week, big time win over San Jose State, who last year was their game was week 14, and it was to decide who would win the West division of the Mountain West. And so this was another big win for the Hawaii Warriors.
Yeah, 4-2 off to a solid start, and 2-0 in the conference. The two losses at the beginning there to two quality users, and if you're looking at their best win this year, it probably came against TCU, winning by 2 scores on the road against a team that had just been ranked the week before. And to put up 56 points on that defense, were really quality performance there for Hawaii, and give them some momentum going into these last two games that they've put to use. Their worst loss got to be the first loss of the season. It came by 25 points. Now that was with a different quarterback. They started one quarterback for that game, and because of the result of that game, made the switch to a younger, faster quarterback, and he has taken them. He took them down to the fourth quarter against Syracuse, and ripped off 4 straight wins here in their last 4 games. So there are a lot of changes happening after that Navy game. Looking at their best moment of the season, if you look at their last game against San Jose State, they were trailing deep into that game. And the game turned on 2 interceptions off of screen passes in the fourth quarter. One of those was returned for 6 points. They got the 2-point conversion, and that really turned the tide of the game, gave them momentum that they needed in order to pull that out. So that's got to be the highlight mark of their season so far. But at 4-2 and 2-0 in the conference, Hawaii looking to contend once again for that Western Division and see if they can't make it back to the Mountain West Conference Championship game.
Yeah, absolutely. These guys are playing really good football again. Coach Silent Hawk has done a phenomenal job again after his first season going 5-7, turned them around in the season, and they're looking good again this year. We'll talk more about their second half, who might be able to give them a run for that Western title, but they're looking pretty good as of right now. Next team we have to talk about here, the Indiana Hoosiers off to a phenomenal start this year after last year a disappointing 4-8 finish. These Hoosier team and Coach Shewack has just turned around entirely. They're off to a great 5-1 start, 3-0 in the Big Ten. They started off the beginning of the year in that Tar Heel Bowl, the classic game every year between Coach Shewack and Coach Sweetest Coin. Sorry about that. They always a classic game, and it was again this year only a 14-10 win there. Then a bye week, and then we mentioned about when we talked about Duke, they get the win against Duke in a double overtime on an interception. Then they had a bye. Then they play Buffalo and on home and actually lose that one by 10. And then when they start their Big Ten play, a win over Nebraska by 8, a win on the road against Wisconsin by 6, and a big win in a rivalry game on the road against Purdue has this team looking really good so far this year.
Yeah, that first game at a neutral site, that was at Cowboys Stadium, and Indiana won that by getting the stop. Washington ran out of time at the 6-yard line, and Indiana hung on for the 14-10 win, and then of course the double overtime win, as you mentioned. Their best win of the season, probably got to be the win against Washington. Washington's still in contention there in the Pac-12 North, and that win really got Indiana off to a good start. They've had a couple of rough seasons at Indiana. They've had a couple of bowl seasons, but really important for them to get off to a hot start. And that Washington game, got them to 1-0 and got things started. As did the double overtime win against Duke. They come out of those two games, two very, very close wins at 2-0. And they can afford to lose that Buffalo game. That, of course, being their only loss, naturally their worst loss. They turned the ball over 3 times. They had 2 fumbles, and Buffalo was able to take advantage in Indiana to get that win. Looking at the best moment, that would have to be their most recent game, the rivalry game against Purdue. They scored the field goal with 29 seconds left that put it at 23-all. And Purdue had a couple of timeouts, so they tried to go hurry up. And 2 or 3 plays into their drive, they threw a pick 6 with only 14 seconds left. So that pick 6, certainly the play of the game, on the road in a rivalry game, in a tie ball game with less than 30 seconds left when they had just tied it up, and they had trailed for a good portion of the game. So, really a big moment there for Indiana to keep them on that winning path. They've got a bunch of close wins, but they count nonetheless. They do sit at 5-1, and they are tied for first place in that Big Ten Eastern Division at 3-0.
Yeah, these guys are looking good right now. Can't wait to talk about their back half of the schedule because it definitely looks a little gruesome. But we'll get there when we get to that part. But right now, we're going to go ahead and jump over to the Mississippi State Bulldogs, who are looking pretty good at a 5-3 record so far to start this season. They started off the year on the road against Utah, win that one by 3. Then they lose to the second-ranked Syracuse 14-35. A close, tight game against Auburn, 35-34. Then the disappointing blowout loss to Georgia at home, 1956. Big-time win on the road in Death Valley against the LSU Tigers, winning 16-13. Then they lose that Barker Bowl, a big-time rivalry between the two brother coaches, 1921. A big win on the road in Tennessee, 42-7. And I know it's not pictured on the screen. You'll see it later, but a big win at home against number 10, Florida, 28-14.
Yeah, they got things started off right. Last year they played Utah, their first game of the season. They lost by 1 score. This year they win by 1 score. And the Syracuse game was close until the very end. That was the game that came down to 4 or 5 plays. And then, of course, that Auburn game, they were trailing 34-28 with just seconds remaining, and were able to go no huddle 2-minute drill and pull out a 1-point win at the last second. They got their butts handed to them against Georgia, but then did rebound against LSU. And that's got to be both their best quality win as well as their best moment. They got the field goal as time expired to end the first half, and then they got a field goal as time expired to end the second half, and win that one by 3, as we said, on the road in Death Valley. Worst loss, that's an easy pick. The Georgia game, they really had no answers. They got a little impatient, and they ended up throwing 8 interceptions in that game. So really turnovers coming to bite them big time in that 37-point loss. But they do sit at 5-3, and they're ranked 22nd, despite the 3 losses. Really on the back of wins against number 7 and now number 10, as well as a win over, I believe, Tennessee was ranked at the time. And so they've got some quality wins, and their losses are to all with teams with winning records. And they're 4-1 in the divisions, or 4-1 in the conference, and tied for first place in the SEC right now. So they're right where they wanted to be. They are in contention, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, these guys have a lot of football left to play, but they are playing pretty good. They have good wins. I mean, besides, like you said, the Georgia game, playing well in the SEC so far with the big wins over a currently ranked 7th LSU team. And you are correct, Tennessee was ranked because they actually, the week before, I believe, destroyed that Georgia Bulldog team that destroyed Mississippi State and got themselves ranked. And then Mississippi State just absolutely obliterated the Volunteers of Tennessee. So these guys are looking good. So I'm excited to see what they do for the rest of their season. As now we're going to go ahead and talk about the Navy midshipmen, who are also on a really hot start. These guys are currently ranked 11 at a 4-1 record, 2-1 in the conference. They started their season off on the road against Hawaii, beat them 35-10, and then had a bye week. Then they play a user game against Utah, beat them 31-14. Then on the road against Temple, win that 45-22. Then they go on a bye, and I don't know if it was the bye week that got to them, but they go on the road against USF, and this USF team just ran all over this midshipman defense, which is not something you see happen very often. And they lose that one 18-44. And then they rebound big time against Southern Miss, winning 63-14, which is something you don't see very often from this offense. But they came out with reckless abandon and just, I think they were a little hurt from that USF game and came out and played a great game there.
Yeah, Navy sitting at 4-1, ranked 11th. They've already had all 3 of their bye weeks. Remember, they do play in week 15 in that Army-Navy game. So they've had all their bye weeks. And they did start out with that great win against Hawaii. That is their best win against a user in quite some time. And as we mentioned, Hawaii had to change their offense after that game. Southern Miss, 63 points. You don't hear 63 points for Navy that often. And that was a 4-1 Southern Miss team that came in undefeated in the conference. They were battling for the inside track in the American West Division. And Navy, 63 points, only giving up 14, and that was against a very good defensive team. So Navy had all the answers. Coach Nedger likes to do a lot of scouting with his teams and keeps track and keeps records of past performances, and that preparation really came to the fore as Navy just wiped out Southern Miss. Obviously, their only loss is their worst loss, that one the week prior down in Tampa to the USF Bulls. And they just didn't have an answer for Chad Roberson, one of the best, if not the best, halfbacks in the country. He's expected to be a first-round pick in the upcoming NFL draft. And Navy just didn't have any answers for me. Had opportunity yards rushing against the midshipmen, no matter what they did. So USF sitting in first place in their division. Those 2 teams matched up in the conference championship last year, and it looks like they might do it again this year. The best moment of the season, I would have to say, for Navy so far, would probably have to be in the Utah game when Navy was down at the half, 14-7. It was late in the third quarter. They had just tied it a few minutes ago and gotten the stop to make it 14-all and gotten possession of the ball. And Peter Moss, the freshman phenom quarterback for Navy, ripped off an 88-yard touchdown run right at the very end of the third quarter that gave Navy the lead for the first time in the game. and they never looked back after that. And that, of course, was a quality win against a user that had beaten them in the past in Brack. So, Peter Moss showing some signs there. He's had some growing pains as a freshman, but certainly explosive. He's ripped off some big runs. None bigger than that, probably, in that Utah game.
Yeah, that was great for this Navy midshipman team, and earlier in the season, before that USF loss, my early season prediction, I thought this team was looking like a national championship contender team. I still think they are sitting at number 11 right here, middle of the season. They still have some games. We'll talk about it when we get to talk about the second half of each team's or user team's schedule. But this is definitely a team that still, if the right teams lose, can make a push at a national title berth. Next, we have speaking of national title berths, we got the Syracuse Orange up here, and this team has just been dominant. Um, Here in League One. I mean, they've won 3 straight national title games. Like I mentioned, it could be more, but I know they were up to 50 straight wins um, um, as of from what I know as of right now. Um, but this team is currently number 2, ranked only behind Ohio State, who's also undefeated. Syracuse is 7-0, 3-0 in the ACC. They started off the season with a win on the road against the 13th ranked Alabama team, 42-17. Then they play a 22 ranked, and these are current rankings as of this current week. But they won on the road against 22 Mississippi State, 35-14 in a user game. Then they have another user game, a Hawaii team that's been the only team to push them all the way to the very end. Now a lot of these games were close, and Syracuse pulls away. But this is the only team so far that has pushed them to the very end of the game, and they win at 41-34. Then they play another 3 straight user games, this one at home against 24 ranked Central Michigan, win that 45-23. This is when they start the ACC play. They go on the road against Miami, beat them 45-7. And then a first in League One history, home game rivalry, not much of a rivalry against Pittsburgh, but they beat them 101-9. Big time win there for the Orange in a rivalry game, and to be the first team to ever put up 100 points in League One history. And you don't see it pictured here, but week 7 they had a bye, and then week 8 they played home against Louisville this last week, and they beat them 48-0.
So far Syracuse undefeated and in the top 5, trying to defend their position as national champs. Um, the best win this season. That's pretty easy. First time any team's ever gotten 100 points, and to do it and only give up 9. Pittsburgh had plenty of possessions, but was only able to get 9 points on the board, so a 92-point victory over Pittsburgh in that rivalry game. No losses to report so far. So, going on to the best moment, I'd have to say it came late in that Hawaii game when star middle linebacker London Fletcher intercepted Hawaii really to seal the deal in that game after Hawaii put up an excellent fight for most of the game. And in fact led at the half and led 17-6 with just 2 minutes left in the third quarter. That interception to seal the deal came after a furious comeback by the Orange. And it was certainly a sigh of relief when Fletcher intercepted Hawaii there. But Syracuse 7-0 and crossing T's and dotting I's and hoping to continue.
Yeah, these guys look red hot. They're looking like another repeat of another national title berth. That's what they're hoping, and they're definitely looking like they can get it done. So it's only time will tell. Next up here we have the Utah Utes. Kind of having a down year from what they were last year. Last year they were able to win they were last year's Pac-12 champ, and this year not looking like they've had like they did last year. 3-4 start to the season, 2-2 in the Pac-12. How they started the season off in a user game, which we mentioned earlier when we talked about Mississippi State, where they had won that game last year by one score, and they actually lose this one by one score, 17-20. Then they go play home against Duke in a user game and win that one 31-20. And then a really disappointing loss at home to Stanford, 30-58. And they followed up with two more losses. User game out on the road against number 11 Navy, lose that 14-31, and they lose on the road to California 36-53. But then they turned it around. They've gotten two straight wins to win a big time win on the road against USC 23-21, and they win a close one against a winless Washington State team 38-35. Last week they were on a bye, so they're going to hope to continue on that two winning streak, see if they can ride that. But Coach Spector will have more.
Yeah, looking at Utah, like we said, they won the Pac-12 in their first year in the conference last year. And really was kind of a surprise winner of the conference this year. Rough start, as we mentioned. The loss to Mississippi State, that's a team they beat by a score last year. Their best win so far this year has got to be that USC game in Week 6. USC 6-1, hanging around just outside the polls. And their only loss this year to the Utah Utes, and that came in Los Angeles in the Coliseum. And Utah able to get the 23-21 victory, easily their most quality win. Their worst loss, I am struggling to choose between Stanford and Cal. Stanford came into the season ranked. And was in fact ranked very highly until just recently, until they had a rough stretch. So coming into that game, Stanford was expected to be tough. California really was a surprise. California last year, had definitely a losing record. So California beating them as much as they did, really a disappointment there for Utah, giving them their second conference loss. And kind of putting them in a little bit of a hole that they're trying to dig themselves out of. Best moment of the season probably would come in that Washington State game, the rivalry game, just this last week. They get the winning touchdown with only 24 seconds left to pull that one out against Washington State, 38-35, and stay on that winning track. So Utah 3-4, hoping to get some momentum underneath them and hoping to continue their march forwards.
Yeah, this team has been really resilient in the past, and they definitely can make the strides to improve. And it's good to have those two straight wins. It looks like they could be moving in the right direction, but we'll have to see. Last team that we have on tap here to see how they're doing in the first half of their schedule is the Washington Huskies, who are glad to have their coach back after last year had to sit out for pretty much almost the entire season. So they're glad to have their head coach back here in the building and with the team. They know he was there with them in spirit last year, but the team did not do so well in his absence. And they're looking to be a little bit better so far to start this season. 4-3 on the year, 3-1 in the Pac-12. They started off, like we mentioned before, that Tar Heel Bowl, big-time rivalry between the two coaches. Always a single-score game, and it was again this year. But Indiana won that one. Washington lost it 10-14. Then they had the bye, and then a big win against the 20th-ranked UCLA team, 20-17. And then they lose to USC on the road by 21, 45-66. Lose to Hawaii on the road in a user game 20-28, which is a very interesting matchup because these are two teams that kind of have similar style play. So it was a fun game there. Then the Barker Bowl, the brothers, he got the win over his brother in that one, 21-19. 4-point victory over Stanford, 28-24. And last week, a big-time win over then-ranked 10 Arizona, now 15th, 31-20.
Yeah, Washington at 3-1 in the conference with three straight wins. Looking on the upswing. The coach, as you mentioned, out for much of last season with that foreign accent syndrome, and came in showing a little bit of rust. Ran out of time in that Indiana game at the 6 yard line, and the worst loss got to be the USC game, giving up 66 points to the Trojans on the road. They really got ambushed by USC there. I don't think they were expecting that. Best win got to be last week's win. Arizona was undefeated, and they were able to come back. They were down 20-7 and scored 24 straight points to end that game and win by 2 scores when it wasn't looking so great at the beginning of the game. Their best moment this year, easy to pick, that came in the Barker Bowl against Mississippi State, where they were able to get the winning score with just 6 seconds on the clock to pull out that 2-point win, 21-19, and win a very, very close Barker Bowl at the very last second. So, big moment there in a rivalry game. And as we mentioned, they've got three straight wins. They are 3-1, and they're tied for first in the North. Looking to continue that, and we'll see how they do in the second half.
Yeah, lots of questions for all these teams in the second half. Lots of big games to come. We'll get more into that here later, but can't wait to see what all these teams can do. Next thing we're going to look at, we're going to go ahead and kind of look around the league. We're going to see currently how each conference is shaping up, and we'll start here in the ACC in the Atlantic side of the conference. As you see, right now, Syracuse is leading it with their 7-0 record, 3-0 in conference, and they're followed closely by two one-loss teams, both 5-1, Clemson and Florida State. Clemson 3-0 in the conference, as Florida State's 4-0. And the rest of the Atlantic not doing so hot. Wake Forest with a 1-2 record, and Louisville, Boston College, NC State all 0-3. Coach Spector to have more on how the Atlantic is looking so far.
Yeah, it's a three-way tie with some undefeated teams, and the Orange will play Florida State this week and Clemson next week. So a lot to be decided here in the next 2 weeks in the Atlantic Division. Syracuse right now in the middle of the peak of their schedule. The most difficult time in their schedule usually comes in these weeks, and everything's out there to play for. Any one of these three teams can win the division. And, Syracuse is going to have to get things started this week on the road in Tallahassee.
Yeah, that's an exciting one. I can't wait to watch that game unfold. We're definitely getting into some really exciting college football as conferences are starting to shape up. Are starting to kind of piece together to see who's who and who's going to be relevant this year in conferences. And so the games start to become bigger and bigger each week. Next, we go into the other side of the ACC, the Coastal Division, as right now, currently the North Carolina Tar Heels leading the division, 2-0 in the conference, 4-2 overall. Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh right on their heels. Georgia Tech with a 3-1, Pittsburgh 2-1. And then behind them is Virginia, 1-1 in the conference, 4-2 overall. And Miami 3-4 with a 2-2 ACC record. And then the bottom right now is the Duke Blue Devils at 0-2 and Virginia Tech at 0-4.
Yeah, Duke will play Virginia Tech this week. That should be exciting for both of those teams trying to climb out of the cellar there in the division. Looking at the top of the division, North Carolina, a bit of a surprise, but they do have a highly rated team, and they finished last year on an upswing. Their only two losses, close losses to a 4-2 ECU team that has been a top 25 regular, and on the road to number 1 Ohio State. They took the Buckeyes to overtime in Columbus. So a couple of quality losses for North Carolina, and since then they've ripped off 4 straight, including those 2 in the conference. Only 118 points in 6 games. So they're averaging less than 20 points a game allowed on defense. That 93 defense really coming to the fore for the Tar Heels. And they have a possibility here to make it to the ACC championship. We'll see what happens in those games against Georgia Tech, Pitt, and Virginia. Those will come later. All four teams there in the running in the hunt. But right now, North Carolina in the driver's seat.
Yeah, and of course, I'd like to say my Duke Blue Devils would like to have something to say about that. As you know, Duke North Carolina, the big rivalry game. Even if we can't be in it, of course, we love to ruin it for the Tar Heels. Next up, we're going to go ahead and switch the division. We go to we switch conferences. We head over to the American Conference. We're going to go ahead and start with the Eastern Division so far. And it's no surprise the USF Bulls are leading the division as of right now with a 4-0 conference record, 5-1 overall. East Carolina follows behind them at a 1-1. Marshall then with the 2-2 conference record. Cincinnati 1-2 conference record with that 1-5 regular record. And the last two teams, Temple 3-3, 0-2 in conference play, and UConn 0-6, 0-2 in American play.
Yeah, UConn having given up 308 points. They have a sieve for a defense. USF does not. They've given up 107 in 6 games. So a stout USF defense and that quality running game led by Chad Roberson, the recipe of success so far for USF. And they won this division last year. They are well in the driver's seat this year and look to repeat as division champs. I really don't see anybody catching them at this point.
No, I think it's really theirs to lose. They're looking pretty red hot so far this year. Already beaten a quality opponent, obviously in the Navy game we talked about. So they've it's like I said, it's really theirs to lose. I don't expect them to probably lose this, they lose their division. I expect to see USF win it and be playing representing the East in the American Conference Championship. Now we move over to the western side of the American Conference, and you have Navy in front there. After we talked about that win over Southern Miss, kind of give them the lead in the West. But right now, you currently have four teams currently all tied for first, all with that 2-1 record in conference play between Navy, Memphis, Southern Miss, and SMU. Now, we did mention Navy did have the win over Southern Miss, so they would have a head-to-head over them. But they have yet to play. Navy still has to play Memphis and SMU, which we know in the past SMU has been one of those teams that gives Navy some trouble. So a lot of exciting things still to happen here in the Western Conference, but also right after those four, you have Tulane at 1-1 and Tulsa looking at an 0-3 record so far.
Yeah, Tulsa bringing up the rear. That's this week's opponent for Navy. And Memphis and SMU, as we said, still on the midshipman schedule. Those are usually later season games for the middies. And we'll see how it all shapes up. Right now, Navy has the inside track thanks to that win over Southern Miss. But with four teams at 2-1, everything's still to play for, and we'll see how that all shakes out in the coming weeks.
Yeah, a lot to still happen. That's like I mentioned before when we were talking about the ACC games to come. There's still so much more action to come, so there's a lot of excitement still to happen, a lot of big games still to come, and just can't wait for the rest of the season to unfold. Now we move over into the Big 12, and right now the Big 12 North sees UCF Knights, Golden Knights, a previously user-led team, winning that so far with a 2-1 conference record, 5-1 overall. Then another one-loss team, Iowa State, right behind them, but with one less win at 1-1. Houston is looking at a 1-2, as well as Kansas 1-2, and the bottom of the Big 12 North so far, Kansas State with the 0-2 conference record. West Virginia winless, 0-6, 0-3 in the conference.
Yeah, West Virginia having a lot of trouble this year, bringing up the rear there in the division. UCF has won this division a couple of times. They won it previously under Coach Sweetest Coin back before he took the Washington job. So he built this team up to be a contender in that division. I wouldn't necessarily count out Iowa State. They have potential. But right now, UCF in the driver's seat and the Vegas favorite to win that division.
Yes, they're definitely looking pretty good, and they're going to want to continue to look good for the rest of the season. as we now move over into the Big 12 South. And here's a surprising face we see leading the division is the Oklahoma Sooners, 3-0 in the conference, but they're tied currently right now for first with TCU. The Horned Frogs also 3-0, and Texas not far behind with the 3-1, but that one loss for Texas came in the Red River Shootout where they lost to the Oklahoma Sooners. And behind them, Texas Tech looking at a 1-1 conference record. Oklahoma State tied with them as well with the 1-1, and Baylor at the bottom right now with the 0-2 conference record, 1-5 on the season.
Yeah, interestingly, it's a three-team race there with a couple of 3-0s and a 3-1. Oklahoma has the tiebreaker over Texas, but has yet to play TCU. That will be a big game to decide the division between the Horned Frogs and the Sooners. And Texas may still have something to say as they have yet to play TCU, and they could still make a run if TCU beats Oklahoma and Texas beats TCU. We might have a three-way tie. So everything to play for in this division, and we'll see who gets the right to match up against UCF in the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, it'll be fun rest of the season there. A lot of big rivalry games still to happen. You still have the Bedlam game, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma later in the year. As you mentioned, TCU, Texas still to play. Oklahoma still to play TCU. So a lot of things can happen there still in the Big 12. And you want to talk about lots of interesting things, lots of good games to still come and tough games. The Big Ten, the Eastern Division right now is looking super tight. I really don't know if I've ever seen it this close so far late in the season. But if you look at there on your screen, you got two undefeated teams. Michigan, Ohio State, both 6-0, 5-0 in the season. But when I say undefeated, just in the regular season, but you actually have three teams undefeated in the Big Ten play with all three 3-0. Michigan, Ohio State, Indiana all sitting there 3-0, and tightly behind all of them is three teams all at 2-1. Penn State, Maryland, Michigan State, and at the bottom right now is the Rutgers at 1-3. But I mean, this right now really could be anybody's division.
Yeah, all seven teams with a winning record. Rutgers is 4-3 and 1-3 in the conference, but they've been close losses for the most part. Maryland, has pulled off a couple of upsets this year already. And Penn State, always a force. They had a huge comeback last week against Rutgers. The Scarlet Knights had a 28-7 lead before the Nittany Lions came back to win 35-28. Michigan and Ohio State, always dangerous. They reside in the top five, in the top three, in fact, the two of them, bracketing the Syracuse Orange in number two. And very much anybody's division. Indiana is in the hunt, which is something that they're very pleased with. They still have massive games coming up against all three of the teams around them. They still have yet to play Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. In fact, they play Michigan State this week for their first game in the division. They're 3-0 in the conference, all three of Indiana's wins coming against the Big Ten Western Division. So Indiana still has a good chance to get some tiebreakers here and contend for this division. But they've got a couple of big mountains there in the Wolverines and the Buckeyes, two national title contenders to get through first. So a lot of tough games, a lot of exciting action here in the Big Ten East. And what looks like possibly the best division in football this year so far.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. This division right now is looking red hot, and would really be tough for anybody to be in there. And so, a lot of exciting football to come as these teams are going to be starting to play each other, especially that back half of the season. We know that's when Indiana has their extreme gauntlet there, where they actually are going to play Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State all back to back to back. So, a lot of exciting football still to happen here in the Big Ten. We move over into the West Division of the Big Ten Conference. A familiar face here leading the division. They've been, I believe, the representative for the past couple seasons here. Northwestern continue to dominate the Western side as they've had in the past with a 3-1 conference record so far, followed by Illinois with a 2-2 conference record, Nebraska 1-2, Wisconsin 1-3, Minnesota 1-3, Both Purdue and Iowa winless, 0-4, 0-3. Iowa winless on the season. Currently, Northwestern, the only team with a winning record so far in the Western Division.
Yeah, I really can't see anybody other than Northwestern winning this. They have the driver's seat, and their only conference loss was to number one Ohio State from the East. So Northwestern has been a top 15 regular the last three seasons, and in fact made a national championship appearance 2 seasons ago. So the Wildcats, a very tough team right now here in League One. You see, they're a five-star team ranked number 6. So I don't see anybody upending their run to the Western Division title. They might be looking at 3 straight Big Ten championship games.
Yeah, I would agree with you, but we actually just got reporting news. We have because we do actually have a user playing right now, so he's seeing some scores. Northwestern actually gets upset this week by Iowa, so the winless Iowa Hawkeyes get their first win over this Northwestern team. What's your reaction so far to that, Coach?
Well, that's shocking. That's absolutely shocking. Iowa getting a win against Northwestern. Nobody saw that coming. Iowa's horrible. Northwestern is excellent. So, that might be one of the bigger upsets this season.
Yeah, it's been reported by our Hawaii user that's currently playing as of right now. We'll just say quickly right now it is New Mexico's winning that one 14-3 over Hawaii at the end of the first quarter. But the final score in that Iowa game was 49-42. The Hawkeyes get it done over the Northwestern Wildcats. Crazy, crazy things happening here. But like we said, every game matters, and you never can rule out anybody. Anybody can beat anybody. So um, that's definitely a shocker. Definitely a shocker. So we go ahead and move on to our next conference, the CUSA on the eastern side. We have no users in this conference, so we'll just kind of quickly talk about them. You got Mid Tennessee State and Florida or FIU both leading and both having really good seasons, both 2-1 in the conference. Mid Tennessee State 5-2, FIU 6-0. FAU behind them 1-1, 4-2. Old Dominion 4-2 with a 2-2 record. Western Kentucky 2-2, and UNC Charlotte with the 1-1 conference record.
Yeah, Middle Tennessee State won this division last year. I'd give them the inside track to win again this year. That I think it'll come down to that game between them and Florida International. That has yet to be played. That'll be towards the very end of the season. But Middle Tennessee State, they lost a game to North Carolina, and they lost one road game to Rice, who has a winning record. So they've beaten who they're supposed to beat, along with what might be an upset win over Fresno State. So Middle Tennessee State a little bit more well-tested, and probably has the inside track when it'll come down to that game against FIU.
Yeah, they got a lot of exciting football still to be played there, so we'll have to see how that one turns out. Next, we move over to the other side, the western side of the CUSA. North Texas so far undefeated with a 2-0 record, followed by UTEP with a 2-1 record there. Rice at 2-2. Louisiana Tech 1-1. UAB 0-3, and UTSA with the 0-2, 0-6 or 0-6 record, 0-2 in the conference.
Everything to play for here. It looks like it's probably going to come down to this week. North Texas is actually on the road at UTEP, and then they play Middle Tennessee State next week. These next 2 weeks, important games for the conference race for the meet and green of North Texas. They've got the inside track, but we're about to find out if they're the real deal or not this week when they take on UTEP.
Yep, so we said exciting games to come here. Nothing really talking about conference-wise here, but just kind of like looking at how these two teams are shaping up, both being independent. As you see, Army looking good again this year. They were pretty good last year and looking good again at a 7-1 record. And, of course, the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame sitting at 6-1.
Yeah, Notre Dame ranked ninth. Their only loss coming to the UNC Tar Heels, and Army West Point, their only loss coming last week on the road by 3 points in Norman, Oklahoma, losing to the Sooners 24-21. So West Point looking very quality. They're just outside the polls. And Notre Dame, of course, ranked ninth. Both of these teams in great shape.
Yeah, they're looking pretty good. They're hoping to continue their success. And I really look forward. Hopefully, Army continues to play well like they have been, because I would be really excited to see, a great ranked game between the midshipmen and the uh, Army team. I love to see that game, America's game, be um, when it's a ranked matchup. It just adds more. Everybody loves that game, but if the two teams are ranked, it just puts a little bit more to it. So now we go ahead over to the Mountain West, and actually got the Western Division up here first before the Mountain Division, as we have a user in that side. And right now, my previous team, the Fresno State Bulldogs, currently leading it 4-2 overall, 3-0 conference record. But they're also followed right behind them by the Hawaii Warriors at 2-0, both those undefeated. But Hawaii currently is losing to New Mexico. But New Mexico, luckily for them, New Mexico is on the other side. And also lucky for Hawaii, the rest of the division is not playing very good. San Jose State 0-2, Nevada 0-3, San Diego State 0-2, and UNLV 0-4.
Yeah, two undefeated teams right now with 3-0 Fresno State and 2-0 Hawaii. Really looks like a two horse race. Regardless of what happens this week for Hawaii, it should come down to that Fresno State game, last game of the season, the rivalry game between Fresno State and Hawaii, as it often does. And those two teams, fighting it out. We'll see if Coach Silent Hawk is able to beat Coach Silent Storm's former team. The Bulldogs were built up well by Coach Silent Storm, and it'll be on the road in Fresno. So Hawaii really needing to be in good position heading into that game, just in case.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. Just got another report. Hawaii now is currently winning their game 17-14 over New Mexico. So hopefully they can continue that trend and to stay undefeated in Mountain West play. Now we talked about the other side of the Mountain West, the mountain side of the Mountain West Conference. Currently, Boise State, Air Force, and Wyoming, and Utah State all closely contested for that one, all undefeated. Boise State, Utah State, both 2-0 in the conference. Air Force, Wyoming, 3-0 in the conference. And Boise State, Air Force undefeated on the season. Wyoming, Utah State, both with only one losses. And then the other two teams, Colorado State with the 0-2 conference record. New Mexico, 0-6, 0-2, only scoring 88 points on the season.
Yeah, huge game this week as Air Force, number 4 Air Force, will play 6-1 Wyoming. And that will be a very impactful game. 2 weeks from now, they'll play Utah State. So things are about to get decided in this Mountain Division. That'll be a huge game between the Falcons and the Cowboys this week. And we'll see what it looks like in just 1 week's time. But right now, all to play for a 4-team race. And at least 3 of these teams, Boise State, Air Force, and Wyoming, very quality teams. And Utah State not that far behind them. Utah State with a very good defense, only giving up 103 points in 6 games. So, it'll be interesting to see who emerges from the mountain. It's definitely the tougher of the 2 divisions.
Yeah, it definitely is. As we saw both sides of the division or both sides of the conference, this Mountain one tight, 3 teams undefeated, and the other side only 2 teams undefeated, the rest winless. So this is definitely the tougher side of the Mountain West Conference. We're going to shift over to the MAC Conference, starting with the MAC East. You have right now currently tied in first place both the Ohio and Buffalo teams, both looking at a 2-0 conference record. Ball State right behind them, 2-1, with that one loss coming to Buffalo last week. Kent State and Bowling Green both follow after that. Bowling Green in front, 1-1. Kent State with a 1-2 record. and Akron is sitting at an 0-2 conference record, 0-6 on the season.
Yeah, looking like a two-horse race. Thanks to that big four overtime win last week, Buffalo has the tiebreaker over Ball State, and they play Ohio this week. So the Bobcats, former team of Coach Doc Jocular, was built up by a user. You see there 95, 97, 93 ratings, and they will be playing the Buffalo Bulls this week, and the winner of that game will be in sole possession of first. So a huge game this week between Ohio and Buffalo will go a long way to deciding that division.
Yes, it will. So cannot wait to see what happens in that game. Should be an exciting one to see those two go head to head. If we go over now to the western side of the MAC, and we have, again, like we have in other ones, a familiar face here leading the conference. Central Michigan really looking like theirs to lose as they sit 3-0 in conference play, and the remaining teams all with losing records. Overall, not necessarily losing in conference, but Northern Illinois 2-4, 1-1 in conference play. Eastern Michigan 1-4, 1-1 in the conference. Western Michigan 2-4, 1-2 in the conference, who the Chippewas will play this week. And then Miami of Ohio 1-5, 0-2, as well as Toledo 1-5, 0-2.
Yeah, this is Central Michigan's division to lose. They right now have a stranglehold on it. They have the tiebreaker over Eastern Michigan. They'll play Northern Illinois later. They play Western Michigan this week. And it really, unless Western Michigan can pull off the big upset this week, that should be all she wrote. As Central Michigan, ranked 24th, looks to be well in control of the division and on the march to their fourth consecutive conference championship game.
I absolutely agree. These guys are definitely in the right place to be winning this division and be representing them in the conference championship. But like we said, it's theirs to lose. So as long as they, like you like to say, cross their T's, dot their I's, they should be seeing themselves in the MAC conference championship.
Yeah, I misspoke. They did not win their division last year with those last two losses, those two upset losses coming in the conference, knocking them out of the conference championship game. So they're looking to make the return visit to Detroit at Ford Field.
Yeah, correct. That is correct, Coach. They did lose those last two at the end to see their way out. But so now we move over to the Pac-12. We're going to start with the Northern Division. Right now, sees Washington on top of that, but they're going to have their handful trying to stay on top. They're 3-1 in the conference, but they're followed closely by a 2-1 Oregon State team, and also a 2-1 Oregon team, who Washington still has to play both those two later in the season. Then Stanford's there at 3-2, and since Stanford beat Washington, if Washington loses one, they would be um, sitting. They would be tie, or the tiebreaker would go to Stanford. And then you got California at a 2-3, and Washington State 0-5, 0-8 on the year.
Yeah, Washington right now with a half-game lead, but sitting right behind them is the fifth-ranked team in the country, the 5-1 Oregon State Beavers, and Oregon right now sitting at 23rd in the country. So two very quality sides in Cascadia left to take on the Washington Huskies in the battle for Pacific Northwest supremacy. As you mentioned, they do lose the tiebreaker to Stanford. So Washington in the lead, but not by a whole lot. They still have work to do, and this division still anybody's to play for. It'll be decided late in the year with some very important matchups.
Yes, and speaking of important matchups, we have a live report again. Oregon State was playing Stanford this week, and Stanford gets the upset over Oregon State and beats them 21-19. So that definitely shakes up that Northern Division even more, as Oregon State was 2-1, Stanford 3-2. So now you're going to see Oregon State at 2-2, Stanford 3-2. So just throw another wrench into that division to make things even more challenging of who's going to win that side of the Pac-12.
Yeah, everything's still to play for. Any one of those four teams can win it.
So lots of exciting things still happening there in the north as we move over now to the south of the Pac-12, and currently you see USC is leading the South with a 4-1 conference record, playing really good football right now. But the Arizona Wildcats right there behind them at 2-1, 5-1 on the season. Then it's two teams follow there as UCLA comes in third, and Utah right behind them. And then the bottom of the side of the conference, Arizona State at 1-2, and Colorado at 1-3.
Yeah, Arizona State is 1-2 in the conference, but they're 18th in the country with that 99 offense, and they do sit at 4-2, and they will play USC this week. So a huge game there for both teams who are still in the running. Arizona State would go a long way to making a run there with a win this week over USC. USC still has to play Arizona, UCLA, and Arizona State. So, and of course, there sits Utah with a tiebreaker over USC. It's another tight race. Looks to be a 5-team race here in the South. Unless USC knocks off Arizona State, that might be the end for the Sun Devils. If they do so, it might become a 4-team race. But a huge game this week between USC and Arizona State. And then another huge game this week between Utah and UCLA. That game, the loser of that game may no longer have an open window to the division. So UCLA, Utah, and USC, Arizona State. We're gonna get a clearer picture after this week, but right now it's a 5-team race.
Yeah, so like we mentioned before, lots of exciting football still to happen, and cannot wait to see what unfolds there. We move over to the SEC Eastern Division. The Gators on top of that one right now at 5-1 in the conference. The Gamecocks of South Carolina follow right behind them at 4-2. Tennessee behind them 3-2. Georgia 3-3. Vanderbilt sits at 2-4, and you have the bottom of the barrel there. Two teams not playing very good. Missouri 0-4. Kentucky 0-5.
Yeah, Florida, South Carolina, and maybe Tennessee, the 3 teams that have a chance to win this division. Florida and South Carolina will play each other late, and that may be the decider. South Carolina right now only has to play Missouri and Vanderbilt before they play Florida to close out SEC play. So South Carolina very much in the running, as are the Gators. Tennessee hanging on to hope, but starting to fade following that big loss just recently to Mississippi State. So a 2.5-team race here, and it won't be decided for a few more weeks.
Yeah, so can't wait to see what happens there. A lot of exciting football still to happen in the SEC, and definitely a lot of exciting action to happen in the SEC West. As currently the Mississippi State Bulldogs sit on top with that 4-1 conference record, as they have the tiebreaker over the team right behind them, LSU, who's 4-1, because the Mississippi State's or LSU's only loss is to Mississippi State, and then right behind them is the 3-1 Alabama Crimson Tide. Then Arkansas falls behind them 3-2, Auburn at 2-2, Ole Miss 2-3, and then Texas A&M 1-5.
There's really 5 teams here that have a chance. Mississippi State's got the tiebreaker over LSU and Auburn. They still have yet to play Alabama and Arkansas. Those will be coming up in weeks to come. But huge win, as we mentioned before, over number 7 LSU gives Mississippi State the lead. If they'd lost that one, they would probably be out of the division race, and it might be LSU's to lose. But as it stands, they did beat LSU, and because of that, they are in the running here. We'll just have to wait and see. It'll be a few weeks. Mississippi State's on a bye week this week, and then they play A&M. But 3 weeks from now, they'll travel down to Tuscaloosa. And if Alabama can hold serve, they've got to play Tennessee this week. And then that'll set up next week's huge game when Alabama takes on LSU at home. So we will know when Mississippi State plays Alabama in 3 weeks' time what that game means. They may have already almost clinch the division by that point if other teams lose. But if Alabama can knock off LSU, then that Alabama Mississippi State game will have everything to play for in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what happens there. It's super exciting. Can't wait for it. So we get off to our last conference, the Sun Belt Division, and on top of the Sun Belt is an old user-led team. It's actually the coach we were just talking about there at Mississippi State. His old Appalachian State Mountaineers are sitting on top with a 2-0 conference record. Followed right behind them is Georgia Southern with a 6-2 conference record. I've already played all of their games so far this season. Have only been Sun Belt games. Then you have Texas State, UL Monroe, Arkansas State, Georgia State, all tied with 1-1. Coastal Carolina behind them at 3-4. Also, all of their games have been conference games. Then Troy at 1-2, and Louisiana and South Alabama both sitting at 0-2.
Yeah, App State, the favorite here. Georgia Southern already with 2 losses. They've only got the one more remaining conference game. That'll be against Coastal Carolina at the very end of the season. So Georgia Southern, an excellent chance to finish 7-2. They already have tiebreakers over Texas State, ULM, Arkansas State, and Georgia State. They've given all 4 of them their only conference loss. So Georgia Southern, they have the loss to App State in the first game of the season. So App State's going to have to lose 3 conference games. And with that 95 overall team with a 99 offense, I just don't see it happening. App State's only 2 losses coming on the road at number 24 Central Michigan and last week at home to an excellent 6-1 USC team. So I would expect that it's darn near impossible for App State to lose 3 conference games here in the Sun Belt. I look for them to repeat as conference champs.
I would agree with you. I think they're going to be conference champs again. So it's just a really good team. They were built up very well. So it's really theirs to lose. So we've covered all our conferences, how they're looking, what we see coming up. And so we'll go ahead now and jump into our current top 25 to see how the top 25 is shaping up here. The first group we'll go is we're going to go over our number 1 through 10, and currently you see the Ohio State Buckeyes lead the country right now, number 1 they have for the past few weeks with that 5-0 record. They get ready to play the Rutgers this week. Syracuse sits there at number 2 as they have for a while at 7-0 as they'll be game of the week on the road against number 12th ranked Florida State. Michigan at number 3 at 6-0. Air Force moved back 1 spot at that 5-0 record. Michigan went and jumped ahead in front of them. Oregon State was number 5, but like we said, they just lost that game to Stanford. Northwestern's number 6 at 5-1. LSU number 7, 6-1. Oklahoma number 8 at 6-1. Notre Dame sitting at number 9, 6-1. And the Gators, after just losing to Mississippi State, dropped from 4 to number 10, and that is the top 10 teams right there.
Yeah, looking at the top 10, Air Force undefeated. They play Wyoming this week. That'll be a huge one. Oregon State and Northwestern lose, so a couple of teams lower than them will move up because they'll drop, having both lost to unranked teams. And, of course, Syracuse playing number 12 FSU and LSU at Auburn, probably, as well as the Florida-Georgia rivalry game. Those are the 3 big matchups in the top 10 that still have yet to be played.
Yep, so we'll definitely be seeing some movement, and we might see some more depending on how those games play out. Now we go to the next section here. We have the number 11 through 20 as I'm trying to make some adjustments. Here we go. So you can see the 20 team there as it's being cut out of the picture. We start with our number 11th ranked team, and that's the Navy Midshipmen, sitting at 4-1. Then Florida State Seminoles, number 12 at 5-1. Alabama getting that SEC favoritism with a 3-3 record, but sits them at 13. Bowling Green, number 14 at 5-1. Arizona just got their first loss last week to drop them from 10 to 15. Boise State, red hot undefeated at number 16 at 6-0. USF 5-1 at 17. Arizona State 4-2, number 18. Penn State 4-2, sitting at 19, and to round out the top 20 is UCLA at number 20 at 5-2.
Yeah, Arizona versus number 23 Oregon sticks out, and of course, the game of the week, number 12 Florida State hosting number 2 Syracuse. Those really the two big matchups there, in addition to Arizona State taking on unranked USC. So possibly see some movement there. Other teams really favored to win. So there may be actually more movement in the top 10 this week than there is in the next 10.
Yes, yes, there might be some more here. And the last bit we have here to talk about, obviously, is our last, the 21 through 25. As you do see the 16, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, but we already talked about them. So we'll go ahead there, start at number 21, and that is SMU sitting at number 21 at 4-3. Mississippi State jumps back into the rankings at 22 after being previously unranked at 5-3. Oregon also as well comes from the out of being unranked to come to 23 at a 4-2 record. Central Michigan stayed right where they were at 24 after 5-1, and Texas Tech, after losing to UCF, drops down from 15 to 25 to round out our top 25.
Yeah, Texas Tech with two straight losses. They were seventh a couple of weeks ago and now barely hanging on. Big game this week on the road at Iowa State. And then, of course, as we just mentioned, number 23 Oregon hosting number 15 Arizona. That'll be a big game. Mississippi State on a bye, and Central Michigan taking on rival Western Michigan. SMU on a bye as well. So Oregon, Arizona, the big game there among the bottom 20, the bottom five.
Yeah, so a lot of exciting football to still be played. So much to happen. We've seen the top 25 rankings there. Some of these teams could stay, could move up. Some of these teams could drop out and never see it again. But we'll have the rest of the season to decide that. Next, we'll go ahead and see currently how our Heisman race is shaping up so far. As you see, Fran Tarkenton is leading, and he has, as of last week, he's in first place there in the Heisman votes. Familiar face, we see Means, the quarterback in Northwestern, here in second, right behind him. Moving upward, Lewis, the running back from Arizona, is there in third place. And you have Collins, the quarterback, dropped one spot there. The quarterback out of Florida, he dropped one to Lewis. And making an appearance for the first time this week, Biner, the running back at Syracuse, has jumped up there to round out the top five in the Heisman race.
Yeah, right now, Tarkenton leading with Means losing that game to Iowa. He may drop. Lewis, the halfback for Arizona, has a huge game this week against Oregon. We'll see how he does. And Collins falling on the weakness of his performance against Mississippi State last week. Ernest Biner making his first appearance on the Heisman watch list. There in fifth. He had a great game last week with 119 yards rushing and 46 yards receiving. On the year, he's getting 90 yards a game on the ground and 65 yards a game in the air, the multi-purpose threat at halfback for Syracuse. Meanwhile, Tarkenton has a quarterback rating over 200 and currently sits in fifth in the nation in rushing with 127 yards rushing a game. So a two-pronged rushing attack between Tarkenton and Biner in that top five rushing offense for Syracuse, leading the way for their offense and making appearances here on the Heisman list.
Yeah, so it's a great group of guys here. Tarkenton trying to follow in the footsteps of a great Syracuse quarterback that just left us last year, and he's doing the best he can to try to live up. And if he could win that one, there would be, I believe, 3 or 4 straight years. You might be able to correct me, Coach. I know it's at least 3, maybe 4 years that a Syracuse quarterback has won the Heisman.
Yeah, they would be it would be four straight here, and we have a strong tradition led by Tanavas's three in a row. Being given to one player. And Tarkenton has been in his shadow for a number of years, waiting his turn. Now it's his turn, and he's off to a great first half of the season.
Yes, he is. And so we'll see what happens for the rest of the season. Hopefully, it's a good one for Tarkenton to try to bring the Heisman hardware back to Syracuse. As now we're going to go ahead and now look into the back half of our user seasons. Um, might have to try to get through this a little bit quicker just due to time constrictions. But we'll go ahead and jump into Buffalo to see what they have the remainder of the season. The Buffalo this week is going to be taking on Ohio, who we mentioned before. Then they're on the road against Northern Illinois. Home versus number 24 Central Michigan. Home versus Akron. On the road against number 14 ranked Bowling Green, and then on the road against Kent State to finish out their season.
Yeah, Ohio's going to be tough. Central Michigan's going to be tough. Bowling Green's going to be tough. They have a decent chance against Northern Illinois, Akron, and Kent State. Although two of those will be on the road. So Buffalo off to a 4-2 start. They're hoping to contend for the division and possibly make a bowl game this year. But they've got at least three really quality teams. Ohio's 4-1, Central Michigan's 5-1, Bowling Green's 5-1, two of them ranked. And it'll be a challenge here for Buffalo in the second half of the season. But they put themselves in a good spot here to see if they can go bowling this year.
Yes, they have. They definitely put themselves in a great spot. I think these guys, the way they started, can at least get out. They should be at least be able to get out two more wins, and definitely should be bowling at the bare minimum. Next, we have Central Michigan. Look in the back half of their schedule. This week, they're playing that rivalry game against Western Michigan on the road. Then they have a tough user game against on their home against number 11th Navy. They follow that with another user game on the road against Buffalo. Then they're at Miami of Ohio, home versus Toledo, and then home versus Northern Illinois.
Yeah, Western Michigan, rivalry game this week, Navy the next week, and three straight user games for Central Michigan coming up here in weeks 10, 11, and 12 with Navy, Buffalo, or sorry, no, two straight with Navy and Buffalo. They're going to have to avoid last year's pitfalls of losing games they shouldn't at the end of the year. If they do so, they should finish the season in the top 25 and make that return trip to Detroit to represent the MAC East, the MAC West.
Yeah, and I believe they should. They look a lot better this year than they were last year. Last year they were kind of squeaking by some teams, but they did have some blowouts. So we'll see. I think these next couple games could determine if these guys are going to be slipping or if they're going to keep playing good football. Next, we move on to the Duke Blue Devils, who this week are going to be on the road against Virginia Tech, who's on the bottom of the coastal with them. They're home against Virginia, home against Miami, at Pittsburgh versus Virginia Tech, and then at North Carolina in that rivalry game to finish off the season.
Yeah, Duke's currently 2-4, and looking at this schedule, looking at their performance, I think they're gonna be challenged to go bowling this year. I think they've got some tough games here on this back half. Georgia Tech's at 4-1. North Carolina is leading the division. Virginia's 4-2. Miami's having a down year. Virginia Tech's having a down year, and Pittsburgh's down a little bit. Those are their three best chances. They're going to have to pull off an upset otherwise just to get to 6-6.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a challenge for this Duke Blue Devils team. But knowing myself, I'm always up for the challenge. I love it, and hope that we can pull it. All I try to do is reference to my players about the year at Fresno State where we were 0-5 and turn around won 7 straight. So I'm trying to maybe use that same momentum or show the guys that we can get it done. But this is the ACC, so it's going to be a lot tougher than some of those Mountain West opponents that are played at Fresno State. Speaking of Mountain West, the next team we're talking about in the back half of their schedule is the Hawaii Warriors, who like we mentioned, is currently playing the new winless New Mexico Lobos currently, and here in Week 9. Then they're going to follow that game on the road against Nevada. Then they'll be home against San Diego State, home against a good Utah State, home against a good Wyoming team in a rivalry game, and then that rivalry game on the road against Fresno State. Those last 3 games going to be crucial to this Hawaii team.
Yeah, I think they're definitely looking at going bowling, and they have some challenges there with Utah State, Wyoming, and Fresno State to try to win the division. I like their chances to win the division. I give them a slight edge over at least 2 of those teams, and I think they can still afford to lose one of those games and win the division. And we'll see how it shapes up. But I like Hawaii's chances to win at least seven, maybe eight, maybe even nine games this year, and certainly contend for the division.
Yeah, they have a good shot at contending for the division. They were able to win it last year, and they're going to try to repeat there. So we just got to say good luck to Coach Hawk and the remaining of his season. Next, we got the Indiana Hoosiers, who we know in their past, this back half of their season has always been one to give them some trouble, and it definitely looks as though it's definitely going to give them trouble again, as they have that rivalry game against Michigan State. They're going to be playing this week. As we looked at their conference at the conference, and their whole side is just red hot playing good football. They followed that Michigan State game out on the road against the Rutgers, home against Maryland, and then right here, that gauntlet we mentioned every year for these guys. They have the third-ranked Michigan Wolverines at home, number one-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes at home, and then on the road against number 19 Penn State. This could be one of the toughest back half schedules that any user has to play.
Yeah, in 5 seasons, so in 15 games against these last three opponents, Indiana has a 2-13 record. They were able to beat Ohio State last year, and a couple of years ago they were able to beat Penn State. But other than that, a very poor record in those last three games against admittedly good opponents. So the money by Vegas would say that at best they go 1-2, maybe 2-1. That would be asking an awful lot. It's possible though. They are 5-1. They've won some close games. They've proven to have some good mettle. 2-1 I think would be a huge victory for them, and what might still put them in position. Although Rutgers and Maryland both with up years, and of course Michigan State, that rivalry game. Indiana usually has Michigan State's number, so if they can get that, those last 5 games will be tough ones. Maryland and Rutgers, like I say, on an up year, and then those last 3 gauntlet games. Indiana 5-1, but I think might be happy if they go 8-4 and go to a quality bowl.
Yeah, I think these guys definitely go bowling. It's definitely going to be tough. But after the start they've had to the season, I don't see I really don't see them dropping off that much. They should definitely go bowling, which is obviously in a great turnaround from the 4-8 finish they had last year. Mississippi State right now, like we said, they're in the front runner of the SEC right now, but they definitely will have their hands full as well for the back half of their season. They're off this week, but then next week they're going to be home against Texas A&M, who's having a down year, but then they go on the road against Alabama, and Alabama's always going to be tough, especially in a rivalry game, and you have to play at Tuscaloosa. Then they're going to go on the road against Arkansas. Then they have a bye week, and then they finish off with the Egg Bowl, the home game against Ole Miss.
Yeah, only 4 games left on Mississippi State's schedule. This week's bye week is their first bye week of the season, so they've played 8 games already. Next week they should beat A&M. That Alabama game is going to be huge. Alabama's been up and down this year. A little bit disappointing for the Crimson Tide at 3-3. So that is a winnable game for Mississippi State. Arkansas is at 4-4, but still in contention of the division. And Ole Miss, of course, a rivalry game. The way they've played so far, Mississippi State has an excellent chance to win all 4 of those games. But worst case scenario, I can't see them going much worse than 3-1. And that would, of course, put them at 8-4, but certainly in contention for that Western Division. They have a decent chance to make it to the SEC championship game.
They definitely do. I will agree with you. At worst, I see them going 3-1, and that one loss would only come to the Crimson Tide, just because it's always hard to beat that Alabama team, especially in a rivalry game and in Tuscaloosa. But I definitely think these guys are in good shape to possibly win the Western and be in the SEC championship game, which would be amazing, being only in the second year in the SEC. Next, we have the Navy midshipmen, who they're going to be playing on the road against Tulsa this week, who are having a down year, so should be able to win that one pretty easily. Then they go on the road against 24th ranked Central Michigan, who we saw took the Syracuse Orange team through 3 quarters, really kind of lost the game in the fourth. Then they have a home game against UConn, which shouldn't be any competition there. Then that rivalry game on the road against 21 SMU, who historically has given this Navy team some issues. Then a home versus Tulane, home versus Memphis, and of course that big America's game at the end of the year, the Army Navy game to finish out the season.
Yeah, it's looking like both teams will be ranked going into that game. That'll be an exciting matchup. The SMU rivalry game on the road in Dallas 2 years ago, where they pulled off a win for the first time in Dallas. They still have a losing record against SMU. That'll be a tough game. Tulane, always a challenge, even though they're 2-4. I wouldn't count them out. And Central Michigan has beaten Navy before. Maybe, well, actually, I don't believe at Central Michigan, but Coach Blitzkrieg has beaten Coach Ninja once or twice in the past. So I wouldn't put it beyond him to get the win. But that'll be a good user matchup. And really, those 2, 3. Well, I mean, Memphis is 4-2. And they have a good offense. So we just mentioned Mississippi State only having 4 games left. Navy has 7 games left, and a couple of tough ones here on the back end. So I think Navy right now sitting at 4-1 and ranked 11th. They've got themselves in great position. If they can beat Central Michigan and SMU, they could afford a loss to either Tulane or Memphis. And of course, West Point is out of conference. That's certainly one that they circle on their calendar every year. But that'll be an exciting matchup this year, and of course, a rivalry game. So I think Navy, the way they've been playing, aside from the USF game, they have a chance to win all of these games. But I think worst case scenario, they lose 1, maybe 2. We'll see how it works out. But Navy in excellent position to contend for that division title, make a return trip to the conference championship where they are defending American Conference champions, and certainly in a great spot to finish ranked.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think the way these guys are playing, besides that USF game, they could be contenders of. I mean, the right teams lose, they win out. You could maybe see a national title berth if they're able to. I'm talking about win the rest of every single game, win the American Conference Championship, and like I said, the right teams lose, they could see themselves there. But definitely, if they can win out, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. These guys should be able to have a BCS bowl game. So I would look to see these guys win, like you say, they maybe 1, 2 games at most. I don't see them losing more than 2 of this remaining schedule. Next is Syracuse Orange. They are red hot. They're continuing that winning streak, 50 wins in a row, haven't lost, and they're going to put that on the line against the number 12th ranked Florida State Seminoles, which is going to be a tough game. They played them tough last year, barely won that one, so Florida State's going to try to look to do the same this week against them. And then they're at home against Clemson, and then the rest of the schedule, how their history shows, neither of these teams should really give them much of a challenge. It's really going to be these next 2 games against Florida State and Clemson. But they have a rivalry game on the road against Boston College, which has not been much of a rivalry in the past. Then a bye week, week 12, home against Wake Forest, 13, and they finish off the season, week 14, on the road against NC State.
Yeah, the last 3 games against 3 of the bottom 4 or 5 teams in the entire conference. So these, like you just said, these next 2 games really going to go a long way to deciding what happens with the Orange this year. Last year, Florida State in Syracuse played us to within 6 points. We won 30-24. So this week on the road in Tallahassee, it's going to be a heck of a challenge. And the way Florida State looked last week against Duke, we certainly have our work cut out for us. And then we'll return home and play Clemson. So those 2 games, as we mentioned earlier, all 3 teams undefeated in the division. This is where it gets hot and heavy. So I hope that we'll be able to win. I don't want to make any predictions on our record, but right now we're in good position.
Yeah, it definitely looks good for them as of right now. But of course, like you said, these next 2 games are going to be crucial, big time for the Orange to see what they do in the Atlantic side of the conference. Next, we have the Utah Utes, who this week are going to be playing home against a 20th ranked UCLA team. This is going to be a big game for them. They're going to really need to win that one if they want to keep their hopes alive in the Pac-12, as they were the reigning Pac-12 champions, and it's not looking good for them so far. But it's going to start, like I said, with that 20th ranked UCLA team. Then they're going to go on the road against a user against Washington. They follow that up with another road game against 15th ranked Arizona. then a bye week, then a home against 18th ranked Arizona State, and then they finish off with a road game against rival Colorado.
Yeah, some tough games here. UCLA, Arizona, Arizona State, all in the top 20, and Washington, a user game. So the way Utah's been playing, both of these next two games are essentially elimination games. UCLA and Washington, the loser of these games will be out of their division, quite possibly. And that user game next week looms large for both. And of course, Utah, Arizona will be good, and as will the Arizona State game. I think Utah has got a tough schedule here on the back end. They could very easily, go 2-3 in these last 5 games and wind up missing a bowl.
It is definitely quite possible these guys are going to have their hands full. They definitely got their work cut out for them. Like you mentioned, they're playing a ranked UCLA, Arizona, and Arizona State. All those teams ranked. Washington, a few losses from being a ranked team as well. So this is not going to be very easy for them. They definitely could, if they don't play to their best play, they could be playing themselves out of a bowl berth. I think they should be able to get it done and be able to pull out enough, but it's not going to be easy. Last team that we have on tap to talk about with the rating of their season is this Washington Huskies team. And they're going to start off this week 9. They have to play at California. Then, like we mentioned, that week 10 game, the user game against Utah. They'll be off week 11. They have a bye, and then tough back half for them a little bit as they go against fifth ranked Oregon State, which will move because Oregon State did just lose. Now, home against number 23 ranked Oregon, and then the big rivalry game between Washington State to finish off the season.
Yeah, I expect they'll win the Apple Cup, and they should beat California this week. I think they'll at least split between the two Oregon schools at the worst, and then it'll come down to that Utah game as to whether or not they'll be able to win their division. So looking at their schedule, I think they have an excellent chance here to do it at the worst, go 3-2. And that would put them at 7-5 at worst. So I think they're in good shape to go bowling this year, and still in contention in the division. We'll see how that shakes out.
I agree. We'll see how that goes. They definitely have a good shot, a good contention of winning there. So just can't wait to see how the rest of these teams do. It'll be super exciting to see how the rest of the season unfolds. Can't wait to see what all our users do and how this season entails and what's to come. Before we get to our last segment here, we're going to kind of go through all these week 9 games. We had a certain order we're going to do it, but we'll start with a game that actually has gone live. So before I say the final score, we'll do this game and then we'll go into our normal order that we were gonna do things here. But because we do have a final, we're gonna go ahead and talk about the Hawaii New Mexico game. I was gonna go ahead and pick Hawaii. I thought they've been playing good football so far, being able to pull out the win. So I thought Hawaii was going to beat New Mexico 35-21. And Coach, what was your final there?
I had them winning by 14. They lost to them last year, but it's hard to pick a winless team to upset a user. So I had Hawaii winning by 14 points.
And the final score for that game actually was 38-27. Hawaii comes on top of the Lobos there. So pretty close there. As I said, 35-21. So I wasn't too far off in the final score there. And so next we'll go ahead and do the Duke Virginia Tech game. Was going to be the first game we talked about because we're going based off of the playing time at what time each game started. The Duke game was first. Obviously, being the head coach of the Duke Blue Devils, I cannot give a score here, so we'll leave this one to Coach Spector.
It's been a rough year for Duke, and every coach likes to be optimistic. This, however, is a road game against a superior roster. And, until I see otherwise, the only evidence I have says that Duke's not going to be up to the task. I've got Virginia Tech winning this one by 17.
All right, so we got that one. Next game we have on tap, number 11 Navy taking on or going on the road against Tulsa. The way Navy's been playing, I think these guys are going to continue to play lights out. They're going to ride off of that big win they had last week, putting up high numbers. And I think they beat Tulsa 42-10 on the road.
Yeah, I've got Navy winning big here. I think they'll win by 28. Tulsa appears to be the weakest team in the conference this year, outside of UConn.
Yeah, absolutely. So both of us got Navy winning that game this week. Next game we got here, Indiana on the road against Michigan State. I think it's going to be a close game. It's a rivalry game. Indiana has had the edge. I was teetering between the two, but I think I'm going to go ahead and go with Indiana. I think they win this game 31-28 over Michigan State.
Yeah, I think Indiana wins by a touchdown. I got to win it by 7. They've had Michigan State's number the last few years, so I'm going to stick with past precedent.
Yeah, that's what kind of helped me go with my final as well. Next game, we have the Washington on the road against Cal. I think the Washington Huskies continue to play good football. I think they should have no issues with this California team, and I got Washington winning 42-21.
Yeah, this California team upset Utah early in the season, and they are 4-3. So they have the same record overall as do the Huskies. So it's on the road, but I do also have Washington winning. I think it might be a little bit closer. I've got Washington winning by 14 in Berkeley.
Next game, we have 24th ranked Central Michigan on the road in that rivalry game against Western Michigan. Based off of how things gone in the past, the Central Michigan team has just kind of had the number of both Eastern and Western Michigan. I think they're going to come out here and show that these guys are back to how they were before, and they're going to win big 49-14 over Western Michigan.
Yeah, this one's interesting. Western Michigan has a losing record and hasn't done well against Central Michigan, but they do have a better defense this year than they've had in years past. And in fact, they're 14th in the nation against the run and 102nd against the pass. Now, Central Michigan is 30th in passing and 75th in rushing, but they would rather run than pass. They've gotten a lot better at passing in the last few weeks, and I think that'll be the tale of this game. If Central Michigan is able to take advantage of that 102nd ranked pass defense and kind of avoid the 14th ranked rush defense, maybe be a little bit more wide open, a little bit more pass heavy, I think that they should roll. But I think that the temptation is going to be too great. I think Central Michigan is going to stay with their ground game a little bit more than their passing game, and that'll keep it a little bit closer than it should be. I still got Central Michigan winning handily. I think they'll win by 17 on the road here in Kalamazoo. Yeah, this will be the battle for first place in the division, and Buffalo coming off that emotional 4 overtime win against Ball State to put themselves in the tie. Ohio is going to be the best roster that Buffalo has played with a CPU team by far, and in fact, the Bobcats come in with an excellent rated team in the numbers and in the roster. They are the number 2 team in the nation in rushing. So it'll all come down to whether or not Buffalo can stop that Ohio ground attack. But in addition, Ohio has the 28th ranked defense. Now Buffalo, for their part, with the 7th ranked rushing defense, they're 7th against the run, facing off against number 2 in rushing. And I think it's going to be too much. I think this is such a step up in quality of opponent. I've got Ohio winning this one big. Regrettably, I'll be pulling hard for Buffalo, but I just think this is too much of a bite to chew off. I've got the Bobcats winning by 24.
And just in case I wasn't heard, I heard that I was having technical difficulties and was not being heard. I had Buffalo winning 28-24 in that game. Just in case you didn't hear me before and you can hear me now. Next game we have Utah playing home against 20th ranked UCLA. And I like what Utah has been doing so far, but I just think the way UCLA has been looking so far this year and how Utah has kind of been struggling, I got UCLA winning this one by 6, winning 34-28 over the Utes.
The Utes come into this game second to last in the nation in the turnover differential. They're at -10 on the year through the first 7 games. And if they don't get that turned around in this game, they're going to have a rough time at home against UCLA. I think that they do manage to keep the turnover battle even this game, but I do, just like you, have Utah losing close, losing by 7 at home to UCLA.
And of course, we got the last game on tap, the game of the week, game everybody's looking forward to. Number 2 ranked Syracuse going on the road at Tallahassee to play Florida State, as this is where our game has been live presented here at Tallahassee, as the Syracuse Orange come in here to take on the Florida State Seminoles, who, like you mentioned before, had taken these guys to a touchdown game in Syracuse last year. So this year, the Seminoles are going to try to revenge that at home. But I just think the Syracuse team is too good. They're just really, really good. They're well coached and well disciplined team, and I got them winning by a touchdown, went 38-31. Obviously, Coach Spector can't make a pick due to this being his team, but we do have a guest picker here, the great Lee Corso, going to make a pick in the Florida State Syracuse game.
I have a special guest going to help me pick this game.
Really?
Yes. Ethan Fisher.
Don't you get nervous? My palms are sweating when you talk.
Come here, Ethan. My palms are sweating. How are you, bud? Who's your favorite Florida State player?
Kelvin Benjamin.
Oh, Benjamin. And who would you like to meet? Anybody?
LeBron James.
All right. Are you ready? Are you ready to pick the game? We got to show our colors. Show our colors.
Show your colors.
Show our colors. That's it.
Yeah.
Watch out, Kurt. Do the LeBron James.
The band is ready to play. Let's go, band.
Leader of the band in Tallahassee. Gabby, thanks very much. We appreciate it.
No, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks.
LC goes with the dog. Enjoy your football Saturday.
And there you have it, folks. Corso going with his old team. He was a Seminole himself. He played for Florida State, and he said he's got to go with the hometown team or his home team. He's got to go with the Seminoles. So he picks the Seminoles to upset the Orange this week. So can't wait to see that game. It should be a good one.
Yeah, we're just going to try to cross our T's and dot our I's and see if we can't escape. We'll take a win by any means necessary. But I'd like to thank all of our coaches for the excellent performance in the first half of the season. We've got a lot of positives. We've got a lot of people who are on the cusp of rallying. And I'll be rooting hard for all of our users this week and throughout the rest of the season. And if I picked against you this week, I'm still rooting for you, but I certainly hope that you use it as motivation and go out there and prove me wrong.
I hope the best for all of them. I hope that you guys, I would love if everybody just goes undefeated in the back half of their season. But sometimes you got to pick for business, and when you make these picks, so obviously no hard feelings. So always rooting for our users to win the games. But again, thank you guys for tuning in. This has been a blast as always for me, Coach Spector. I hope it's the same for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Always a good time, and looking forward to a very exciting back half of the season, and hoping that we all excel, and looking forward to getting as many teams as possible into postseason play.
Absolutely, of course. Hopefully that all of our users can sneak in there. Would love to have no users sitting at home for the bowl games. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. This has been League One College Game Day. Looking forward to see you guys out there. You guys all have a good one.